Thanks for joining us here this afternoon. My name is Kat Riley. I am with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. I am the acting director of the Built for Zero Canada team, and I'm your moderator today. We're going to kick this off with a land acknowledgement. The 2024 National Conference on Ending Homelessness is being held on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory since time immemorial. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness acknowledges the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from coast to coast to coast who participate in this conference and lead the work to end homelessness across Turtle Island. We have 3 presentations today, and we will have time for a Q&A of all presenters at the end, so we ask that you save your questions for all 3 presentations until the end. Out of respect for the presenters, we ask that attendees stay throughout the entire session. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenters. We will be hearing from Susan McGee of Homeward Trust Edmonton on Evolving with Purpose. We'll be hearing from the Region of Waterloo on Navigating the Complexity Together, a Roadmap to Functional Zero by 2030. And we'll be hearing from about the Thompson model, a revolution in cab governance. And for that, we'll be hearing from Andrea Hatley, Leo Moose, Rona V. Smith, and Michelle Nicholsaw. So let us kick it off with Susan McGee of Homeward Trust Edmonton.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the land acknowledgement, and I am very honored to be here as a guest in these lands and in our country of Canada. I'm from Treaty 6 territory, and I'll tell you a little bit about my organization and how we evolved and why that does still ring, it rings so importantly for us. I'm also going to say that my presentation is a little like one of these things is not like the other. I'm going to talk about our organization, and I apologize to anybody online because I did add a couple more slides because I thought I should situate like our structure or organization a little bit in a session with so much rich information about governance and the way that we've built our organization and what inclusion means for us. But I'll be quick on that because I also really sent in my submission feeling like we probably need a bit of, to share a bit of our reflective moment in our evolution as an organization and as a sector. So I'm going to emphasize that a little bit more, but I will start with just in terms of myself as well. Part of the story I'll share with you is I've been with the organization for almost 20 years through a few iterations. Homeward Trust was an evolution over that time. We actually started as the Edmonton Housing Trust Fund in '99 and Edmonton Joint Planning Committee at the time, the Community Advisory Board structure merged to create Homeward Trust as the community, really emphasized we needed like an organization that could really umbrella and focus our efforts. And at that same time that we were launched, we were in the middle of writing our first plan to end homelessness in our community in 2008. So from my beginnings in 2005, going through that, and then as an organization, we've grown. We have a little bit of a complex corporate structure. I sometimes say, it's we do this work by any means necessary, and if that means like opening a furniture store, we've done that. We also have some development companies. We develop and build supportive housing, and we work with community partners to provide support in all of those environments, as well as continuing to be that community advisory board and entity. So, for those that are interested in corporate stuff, it's worth knowing a little bit of that because we've kind of kept up and kept pace. We were a very early adopter of plans to end homelessness. I think Calgary beat us by a few months, but that was a big kind of push towards the kind of work we do in community today. We have our CAB structure. Within that, I didn't mention, but just, our organization, when it merged, was created by a joint implementation team that was Indigenous leadership and other leaders at the time, a small team, but representing those 2 other organizations, and created a society of which a minimum of 4 of our 9 board members are Indigenous, and we have Indigenous advisory roles, including an Indigenous Advisory Council and a nominating committee to make sure that we are drawing from the leadership and community-based relationships that we have. So that's been kind of how we're built. We are that community entity. The community, the Government of Alberta refers to the 7 communities that similarly have plans as CBOs, so we're the CBO, and we have a very strong relationship as well with the City of Edmonton and do a lot of joint work and joint planning work. So that's kind of who we are, how we've evolved. We've recently updated our community plan. There's some finer points that need to be put on it specifically around governance, and so this is great timing to talk about really, how challenging that's been in a very, very different environment. A lot of that work I was involved in 2005 to 2008 to create this organization that I am super proud of, as well as the community agencies that we partner with. Homeward Trust and our community partners very proudly had reduced homelessness by over 45% by 2019. We've got a very robust system of referral and data and analytics, and tons of stuff to be proud of, as I'm sure many of you in this room have done really amazing things as this issue has been differently resourced, if not better resourced. But with all of that, we're also living in a time where that change is fairly pointed, and the context that we're working in has been really challenging to keep up with from a governance perspective. And my comments today are a little, really just myself, my mind, my heart, speaking out about what keeps me up at night, about doing the right things and making as much impact as we should. As an organization, this year we're actually administering $60 million, so that's a pretty significant sum of public money, and we take our responsibilities being trusted with that very, very seriously. And outside of our role, I'm sure in your communities, whether you're representing a municipality or a community-based organization or other orders of government, there's changing roles. We've seen orders of government get differently involved over the pandemic, and other sectors, and maybe not retracted or changed or regrouped. And that's changed a lot of how we do our work and how we engage. And that is, we have to kind of force ourselves to think about what that means to how we're built going forward. Many of you might be new to these rooms. Some of you I recognize and have known for a long time. Back in the day when we were working on those first 10-year plans, we were going to work ourselves out of a job. There was some orientation, my board orientation material back in the day, very much often referenced. $1 Million Murray, if you're not familiar with that reference, Malcolm Gladwell had written a piece in the New York Times. It was later in one of his books. And it was really, that kind of foundational, very accessible messaging about the cost of homelessness. And there was a couple of police officers in Reno, Nevada who he engaged with, and then there was some research done at the time, a very young Dennis Kulane, who was studying shelter usage at the time for probably the first time, and really added up all of the costs of this one man that they had known on the streets of Reno for a long time, and the cost of his engagement in the system. So that message was very accessible, and it fueled a lot of our early argument for housing first, because it was also kind of the first time in magazines and books that we started to kind of see the popularization of the concept that Samson Bear has played such a big part in establishing, and then it's grown across North America and frankly all over internationally. So we go from there. We've had that growth I referred to earlier, and that need to check in terms of how it's affecting our work right now. We have that changing landscape. I'll highlight it again from a little bit more of a pointed lens. Outreach is very different. There's many sessions at this conference about encampments, and a lot of different views about how we should be approaching and serving and supporting folks both in encampments and getting them into housing from encampments. And that is not something, I was in 2005, the first real encampment that we had in Edmonton over that course really was an impetus for the 10-year plan. And then we didn't have encampments like we do now, again, until 2019 prior to the pandemic, and then right now what we see is a very, very different reality. So that work has changed. Who's doing it with us has changed. There's a much larger enforcement role in many communities. We have shelter models. I know some of you have been in a couple of the sessions talking about the importance of 24/7 shelters and housing-focused shelters and how that is completely different. But it's meant also we have to model our system differently. People are staying in shelters, getting supports, hopefully getting into housing as quickly as possible. But it's a very different modeling when you think about the number of units you have in your community that are shelters and how many you actually need. So amongst that, from a system planning perspective, we see that. We also see, and I will, I think there's probably some other folks that would do this as well, but really challenging us to be like, not everything is housing first. And frankly, the biggest risk to housing first is when it's done poorly. And we've had a lot of critics of the sector, which is kind of what I'm amplifying today, talk about whether or not we actually knew what we were doing when we started this work and whether we were effective at all. And even if we know that we've housed, and in my community, almost 20,000 folks have been supported in some way through our system. We're supporting 2,200 folks right now, tonight, with rental assistance in different programs that we fund. In spite of all of that, it's very easy to find evidence from somebody's perspective that Housing First isn't working here or elsewhere. We have those evolving roles, collaboration. I, at one point, kind of would like joke about, there was a point where it'd be very difficult to schedule a meeting with our province 18 years ago, 20 years ago, about homelessness, and not just our province now, but I spend a lot of time in meetings, and a lot of times in planning conversations, and a lot of times providing information to other meetings that other people are going to, because for some reason we think it's really important to know today. When we talk about real-time data and how important it is to the work, somehow it slipped into everybody needs to know everything all the time, and Homeward Trust should provide it. So, being Googled, if you will, about the state of homelessness in our community requires a machine, just to be able to do that. Is that the right thing for us to spend our time on? Is it actually helping us? So those changing rules, the changes that have happened within our system planning responsibilities, it's now very much part of our vernacular as a sector. And there's a system planning collective. There's been lots of great effort to name and explain that work, but it is still quite different in different places. So what is it? And ultimately, are we all just doing too much? Which is, I think, one of the outcomes of all of that additional collaboration. This is a slide. I know many people have seen this number, the growth of the sector in terms of number of employees. When this came out, we can talk about this number. I mean, it quite frankly, it also came out during a time when, for many of you, it seemed that social services and our sector particularly were the only folks working and expanding during the pandemic, because the work still needed to happen and we were still all going in. So there's some of these impacts to this number that it's going to take another census, I think, to be able to look back on it and think about. Regardless, this is the kind of information that's out there, and anybody who wants to look at or find evidence to suggest that we're less effective than we could be, this is a kind of fodder that they can rely on, and it's public information and out there. The other thing that they might look at is just, have we made the difference? And one of the things that gets published, it's again through different data that comes either from at a federal level. These are federal numbers, but shelter utilization over a period of time really hasn't gone down. Does that mean more people are being housed? And that's one answer. Am I trying to prove a point with this number? It's really the point to me is we should all be very much aware of the kind of information that right now other folks are relying on, and we should be relying on to think really long and hard about how we focus our efforts and ensuring that we're actually reporting on the stuff that matters. A couple of things, and my colleagues at Help Seeker always help us with our public information data polls, but just from a who's talking about what, this little graph shows over time encampment searches and homeless encampment searches, and this is just like the public awareness and interest in and trying to find out more because this is what they're seeing in their communities. It's a entire sector that is, really examined and questioned and challenged very differently. This is just public information in terms of what are people asking about what's going on in their community. And Susan, if you were really doing a great job, you'd be done by now kind of conversation that happens sometimes. So for me, that's, I'll take a little bit longer here. The sector has grown, and we continue to be challenged. We have different roles in the sector. I had another slide, as an organization, when we first started funding 10 Housing First teams became 12 very quickly. Then we had some additional programs, and we very quickly went to now about 200 programs, 300 plus FTEs involved in the work that we're doing. We opened 5 supportive housing sites with the City of Edmonton leading the development of those in the last year. We've got 3 under development right now. My organization's grown a lot, and we've got a lot more people doing really great work. It becomes, though, also exponentially more challenging to keep all of that energy focused in the right direction. We have bureaucracy that has come with that. If you're new to the role and the kind of planning work, we've always had to report a lot. I'm not saying that that has gotten that much kind of contractually heavy, but that other thing that I referred to earlier, everybody wants to know everything that we're doing all the time. And so it's not just the formal reporting, it's, and you know, from a governance perspective, I have a fabulous board, really supports us being able to do all that creative, like by any means necessary work. Their board packages have gone from, you know, 30 pages to a few hundred. and it's like, that's the due diligence of running a complex organization now and taking responsibility for those resources. There's also, you know, in many sessions, people have acknowledged that we are working in an environment with many crises. Housing is always the ultimate solution to homelessness, but there's absolutely so many intersecting issues and challenges that have made the work that much harder, including drug supply and mental health issues that are not supported appropriately. And we are still counting maybe the wrong things sometimes. You know, there's a debate currently in my city often about the by name list, our by name list. I mean, I still don't know anything better than by name and by birth date, and engaging folks and them engaging with our system to seek help for their houselessness. But you know, that list at over 4,000 now has doubled more than doubled since 2019, and it's being questioned all the time. And our language has to get better, because on one hand, those individuals are in a housing crisis. About 2/3 of the list are provisionally homeless. That fluctuates some, but that means there are lots of people. We've got 50,000 folks approximately in Edmonton that are in core need and paying more than 30% of their income on housing. We have people who just started like coming to the sector to just get housing help, when we used to be much more focused on a different kind of cohort within our work. And the by name list has invited us to be, in some ways, a solution to a whole bunch of other challenges. So this is still a very committed, we're dealing with lives, human lives. We lose people every year. We have many deaths, and I'm sure across Canada, we see the toll that houselessness plays on individuals, and it is a cause of death. And we have this incredible responsibility, honestly, to be renewing and thinking really hard. And it's with that I kind of, want to challenge all of us to think very hard about how we're built, what we're doing, how we're designing our work, and how we say no. There's often an analogy in how we've described, again, back to the BNL, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg thing. That was in a lot of my presentations like 12 years ago. Many of us kind of had that analogy, and it speaks to the visible homeless versus, the number of folks that might be experiencing homelessness in our community. But, we kind of have lost that understanding. And so we're having arguments about whether this is actually a crisis with some folks. And there's another analogy and visual that comes up for me back to that sector and that collaboration. We're very fortunate to sit across tables with healthcare providers and mental health and addiction services, because we need those services. But it's also meant that we've had to really double down in some roles, and we meet a lot. And I really want to question within my organization, and I challenge you to think about how we resource some of the work, and to make sure that in engaging those systems, it's still their work, and that we don't just take it on because we're willing, and that's one of the things that happens a lot. And again, getting back to that analogy, it's kind of like a mudslide. We've got the sector is picking up all of the balls before they hit the ground, trying really hard to be all of those solutions to so many people, and in many ways their challenges are much, much bigger than we're both mandated to address. And I would challenge us to say, even should or can address, because I am not a doctor and there's a lot of things you don't want to trust me doing in terms of taking care of people. I didn't raise children, I forged steel. They're not like, I'm just not that person. So I would say, like, I have to really think hard about where should some of this work sit, and just because we've got those partnerships, are we getting, pulled into work we really shouldn't be using housing dollars for doctors? I know that there's sometimes a real push to say, like, we want more flexibility, but I struggle with that. Because there's really, and youth homelessness is a space, I know there's some great sessions here on youth homelessness. It is an area where we have very limited resourcing as an organization, because there's a lot of mandated roles that are to support youth, and when we take on a bit, we end up very quickly being asked to take on more. And so that's where we're at. It's just a reflection for me, a bit of a, this is what keeps me up at night. And in our community, as we start to like roll out the community plan, there's a big governance accountability framework to that. And it's very challenging, because we're doing it in an environment where a new table pops up all the time, because there's another table, another focus group, and task force are great. I've never actually, in my career doing this for a long time, I've never seen a new government that didn't have a task force. So they happen, but what's our role in those rooms, leadership-wise, challenging ourselves in the sector, as a sector, challenging those other systems to, again, not try to do it all, and focus on the demonstration that we so early were able to impact in our innovation and counting what mattered, and not being like a servant to really a fairly big bureaucratic beast that is many, like all orders of government and community as a whole. It's a challenge to me, and I think as we roll those things out, we know that it's very difficult, because we have many, many more tables in our community than we had when we created Homeward Trust in 2008. And aligning all of that is actually not going to improve it. We have to actually be a little bit more disruptive than that. So that is my presentation, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage the Region of Waterloo. They are going to be speaking on navigating the complexity together, a roadmap to functional zero by 2030.
Thanks, Shar. Appreciate you. All right. I know, and of course it's a PC and I use a Mac. So. Where do we go? Full screen mode. Yay.
Okay, well, is this thing on?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay. Thank you. Before we start out, we just want to start with an apology a little bit, that if you went by your program, you came here to see Chris McEvoy. And we understand why you would, but with some apology, we had a few changes and it took a different direction. But if for now, it feels better, we are the three Chris's. However, we do have names, and so I'm going to ask.
Hi, I'm David Alton. I'm from the Social Development Center, and my role is to facilitate lived expertise consultants and their voices into processes.
And I am Peter Phillips. I work for the Region Waterloo in the Housing Division. I have been for the past year and a half the project manager overseeing the creation of the plan to end chronic homelessness.
And I'm Ben Balfour. I work for Overlap Associates. We're a consulting firm supporting and co-leading the plan development process.
And to put some rationale to this change is that we felt that hearing about our plan, which is about inclusion, really is underscored by showing the three different types of voices, although we have many more in how we created this plan. So to start the discussion, we wanted to recap the major milestone, obviously, which was on April 9th, 2004, the Region Waterloo Council endorsed the report called Navigating Complexity Together, and a roadmap to functional zero by 2030. It has become the official systems plan for the region that will guide the work of our local housing stability system over the next few years. It is a plan that has 7 strategic principles and 30 broad actions for us to work on. The plan, though, itself has been integrated with perspectives and priorities and calls to action from lived experts, service and health providers, grassroots organizations, equity groups, and citizen groups. And now we will ask you to journey with us through the story of our inclusion. Our goal today then is to share to you where that journey began and share some highlights of building this plan as a roadmap. In order to do that, we have coined it as one plan and 3 voices. So it will be the story that represents the role of the service system manager. It will be the story of how lived expertise prototyping integrated into the plan, and David will talk about that. And it is a story of community co-creation with a vision for collective leadership and advocacy that Ben will share. Finally, we will share some learnings that we have collected through this process, some very intentionally, some that emerged through tough moments. And those challenging moments, however, have reminded us that indeed we are changing things and that we need to be encouraged even by the tough moments. All of it is moving us incrementally towards transforming our system. So the region of Waterloo story, setting the context. Our community, as all communities, slowly emerged out of the chaos and haze of the pandemic. The region and its community were struggling with the escalating crisis of people experiencing homelessness. While encampments have existed, a large number of encampments grew quickly in our downtown cores in Kitchener and Cambridge on regional land. And what we faced as a community was very challenging, and we needed to change the trajectory. So in the midst of all that, in the fall, or August, I should say, of 2022, Regional Council directed staff on 2 major actions. The first was immediately create some interim strategies during the fall. And while that's on their way, create a new multi-year system plan that addresses chronic homelessness, and we had a year to do it. For the interim strategies, which we're not really here to talk about today, but staff consulted with community partners to gather input to what needed to be done, what would be effective in the immediate. Regional staff quickly pulled together sectors of our community in ad hoc forums, something that we often do during times of urgency. This led the region to stepping into new ground and opening its first outdoor hybrid shelter comprised of 50 tiny cabins as a transitional shelter. Meanwhile, while that was underway, the plan development was concurrently being considered in how to approach it. Reflecting on the magnitude, the complexity of the issues at hand that the community was facing, regional housing leadership wanted us to take a different approach. To define that, the housing and homelessness crisis is a community-wide issue. The plan, therefore, needed to be grounded in the community. It could not be, once again, another regional-led planning process to create a regional system plan, because we've been there and we've done that. For the plan to be successful, it needed to be endorsed by the community. It needed their buy-in, their voice. The 3 big deliverables then was to create and develop that community system plan, and we were to focus it and center it in lived experience and equity. Also, we wanted to transform the way in which the work is done and the way the region works with its community partners. And finally, if we did it well, we would create a living plan process that is one that is organized, that is connected, flexible, adaptive, and responsive for whatever lies ahead. To set the work in motion, we intentionally positioned key roles in the work. Regional leaders selected a project manager, myself, to take on that role, to ensure the typical project manager responsibilities of timelines, key deliverables, and to make sure we kept Ben on track. That is what project managers do. However, a large part of the role that I was commissioned to do was, in fact, to engage with our community partners and groups within the housing stability system initially to bring a much more relational focus to the project. It was recognizing that perhaps over the years of work and planning, relationships between the regional process and its partners have not always been easy, and with that, some levels of distrust. We recognize that in some cases, relationships and trust needed to be rebuilt slowly, while others needed to be newly established. The project manager role was focused on the early stages, therefore, on laying foundations for building a system bridge later on and inviting people to come and join. Decentering the region is the next chapter in the story. In January of 2023, we entered into a contract with Overlap Associates, who is our local human-centered design-focused consultant. We love him as Ben. Part of the role was, of course, for our consultant to be the traditional heavy lifter of engagement, surveys, data collection, pulling together the report in its final form. However, it was much more intentional in that Overlap would also become the lead facilitator in doing the work with the community, with the support of the project manager and the regional staff. It was important optically and functionally to have that third-party facilitator, we felt, to lead the community process, which would indeed then allow the service system manager, which is part of the community, to be a member at the table in the discussion. The next chapter in this story is the unexpected gift. Shortly after we initiated the RFP process, which secured our consultant, Overlap, or Ben, we were approached by a local grassroots advocacy organization, the Social Development Center, Waterloo Region, who had strong relationships with people with living and lived expertise, and they had formed a lived expertise working group that has a relationship to them. And I believe today we have members of the lived expertise working group and who have been part of there's Shar. You have to talk to Shar. In short, they came to us and said, we have the strong position to be able to facilitate having voices and perspectives of lived experts included into that process of creating the plan. The goal was to ensure then that the lived experience voice and community-based research that they have been working on would be integrated. While David will share more on this, it was a marked new moment where an advocacy organization became in partnership with the service system manager, and perhaps both parties were a little surprised. So through this MOU, our project core team, now comprised of the region, Overlap, and Social Development Center. So in April of 2023, we went before council to officially launch the process to develop a community-driven plan. We co-presented strategically as a core team with representation from the region, Overlap as our consultant, and Social Development Center. And as we began to form this work in our minds, we created an informal tagline that we have continued to use that defines the process to end chronic homelessness. And it was one that said that we would do this in community, by community, and for community. And we knew that that would be different than we had before. And we also knew that as we engaged in this journey, it would be a journey of self-discovery and collective impact. Now I'm going to pass the story over to David.
So the Social Development Center, we are not usually in these kind of processes. 5 years ago, we were defunded close to extinction. But through what we did have was deep networks and relationships with advocacy groups, with mutual aid groups, with different kind of grassroots groups who were trying to talk into the system. And one of those relationships led to the Lived Expertise Working Group, if you were at that presentation earlier this morning, who was very interested and invested in what the region was going to do and say about homelessness. And so we were following the development of this plan process. And when we saw the RFP, we had a conversation. We're like, there's no way that an organization of our size and capacity could do this whole process. Also, would we really want to be in between the firing line of every other agency and grassroots group in the community? Probably not. But we did have this network of relationships, and we're like, is there a way that we can center those voices further into this process? So we wrote up a proposal and sent that in. And the proposal was all around this idea of what we call the lived expertise prototyping process. Because we knew that the region had never had this type of relationship with community voices before, and so we needed as much flexibility and grace to try out new ideas and really figure out what does it mean for an institution of this size to engage with lived experts. So we started with this, and when the region said yes, we were floored, but it was quite a surprise, but it was really exciting too. And so we brought together a small group of lived experts and a small group of regional staff to just first starting what we call co-sensing to try and figure out how does it even look like to relate to each other? What language do we need to learn? How do we build a better ability to translate across context and community and power? And what are some of these key principles we need to start embedding now at the beginning of the process, so that when we get to the plan itself, we are already well on our way to having some kind of harmony across this dynamic community. And we call this the system seeing itself, because our goal was for the people who are overseeing the system to actually really be able to see the impacts of the system and how that felt into the lived lives of people on the ground. And so we had several months of that kind of discerning process, and we continue it to this day to be having these check-ins on how does this relationship together make sense, and how do we keep overcoming some of the hurdles. But kind of in the early stage, we developed these 5 prototypes themselves. And these were ways to try and, these were the things that the lived experts were most passionate about. And we were like, let's see how far we can take them. And some we were able to take very far and some not as far. So for example, one is the system seeing itself, this whole process of reflection and relationship building. Another was the continuum of care, which is around bringing together frontline workers from those who are in formal systems like at agencies, at the region themselves, all the way down to mutual aid frontline workers. How can they better communicate with each other and coordinate around the many gaps that are constantly emerging throughout the system? The next one was the human rights review. There was a big push for human rights language all throughout this plan, and so this was an initial process to get started on how do we help embed as many of that language and that thinking and really start expanding it and unpacking it with on-the-ground examples. And then we had intentional communities, which was a recognition that unsheltered communities are keeping themselves and their communities alive, and maybe the region should just resource those communities themselves. And then lastly there was a big interest in public land, so we started some conversations on that. Unfortunately for that one, I wasn't able to move much further because there's just so many layers of interest around land. But the other 4 moved forward for quite a while. The intentional communities group was looking at things like 24-hour drop-in centers and like sandbag houses. But also, unfortunately for that group, we reached a point where we realized by being in conversation, we were actually slowing things down. And so we stopped that prototype so that the lived experts could actually go into community and just do those projects without having to deal with all the different liability concerns and all that. And then what we have done more recently is touch base with that cohort of people to really understand what their projects was, what they learned, and most importantly, what were the impacts of us actually forcing the risk all onto them, right? By letting them go free, they were able to move faster, but they also then had to deal with criminalization and tension and risk that they wouldn't have had to if we were able to walk with them through the whole process. And so now we're doing that debriefing to really understand what that means so we can learn from that moving forward. But the others are continuing on and moving forward to this day, and those processes eventually came to the plan writing, the Planned and Chronic Homelessness writing itself. And to be clear, there were 2 planned documents, and they were presented to council as co-equal documents. One document was a summary document that was trying to combine all the learnings from this whole process, and one document was to really articulate as clear as possible what were the priorities of the lived expertise voice. And the biggest priorities there were around definitions and concrete actions that could be actioned quickly. If you read the 2 documents, you will see that they are very interrelated. They're constantly referencing each other, but that we felt it was really important to have those 2 voices to really center and amplify what that means. And we think of it as like a discursive approach, that it's actually important that council knows that there are 2 different definitions of chronic homelessness and 2 different definitions of functional zero, and that it's important to be able to hold those tensions of that difference. Along the way, there's been a lot of emergent stuff that's come up, so new ideas and prototypes, and we've had the flexibility through this process to be able to quickly pivot and adapt to them. So winter warming proved a big priority, so we really helped try to push that along. There was a lot of encampment evictions, and so we jumped on those and tried to unpack that, and we've seen a huge transformation in how the region has approached encampment evictions from when we started to now. And we've also had the blessing of being invited by the region to do reviews of shelters and engagements on shelters themselves. So these are really things that, because of the flexible nature of the prototyping process, we were able to adapt. And now we're in a position of looking to the future, a future of policy review, a future of taking that system, seeing itself, and embedding it into change management processes within the region. And most importantly for us, expanding our roster of lived expertise consultants so we have more voices at the table, and we are continuing to fill our own gaps. So it's been a very interesting process, but it's only one part of this whole system, and Ben will talk about the much bigger picture.
Yeah, thanks, David and Peter. So again, sort of you've heard the region story, the lived expertise prototyping story. This sort of thread is around the broader community co-creation story. And one of the sort of key logic model pieces or ways that we were talking about the work in the early days and continue to this point is some of you will probably have bumped into the IAP2 or International Association of Public Participation Spectrum. And talking about the work in terms of us trying to move more and more of the work that we're doing further to the right on this spectrum, and what does that actually mean? And how is it appropriate in every circumstance? So there's lots of nuanced conversations around which decisions need to fall where in this spectrum. But this really, became a core way that we were talking about the work and understanding and thinking critically. Hearing Susan earlier talk about, reflecting on our role and where it's important to be. This is another moment of like, where are we including lived expertise voice? Where is it most appropriate? Where are we including community voice and how? So this has been a key touchstone. And then I'll add one more piece. There's also some learnings. Again, this is all very emergent, and we continue to learn about this. So a very recent example, and an example that highlights that there's actually multiple experiences that you can have on this spectrum. So I'll smile at the folks in the back of the room. The funding strategy we just worked through, genuine intentions to have that feel like a collaborative process, but as you grind into the work, as you run into different policy and procedure that's standing, the actual experience of having community members speak into that process, for them, and some of them are in the back of the room and they'll tell me, it probably felt more on the informed side. So there's actually multiple different perspectives that you can pull out, and we can help make sense of how folks are engaging in the work using this framework. So in order to move the work more to the collaborative end of this, we developed a larger, we called it a co-creator group. This is not every organization. There were many. We started with about 50 as a group that would guide the work, set the vision for the plan, and really get into the trenches with us to actually develop what is the plan going to look like? What are those different actions and strategies that we're going to do? It's an evolving group. We're now up to closer to 100, and we're currently talking about what is the next iteration of this group. How are we actually situating this group more concretely in the system? In terms of the actual sort of flow of the work, Gantt charts tell you nothing. They never do, because it's always messier than this. But I really want to showcase how the co-creator group started early and has continued and will continue to be sort of that stabilizing factor. And the other thing that you can't read from this is how sort of the larger co-creator process represented at the top of the slide actually spoke to and interconnected and had different touch points with the lived expertise process that was happening concurrently. And David talked about David talked about the reports that we created, and if you go read them, you'll actually see we got right down to the nitty-gritty of using the document formatting to show when and where lived expertise voice was showing up in the document. And it's those types of negotiations of, hey, when is it appropriate to do this, and how are we bringing those voices in that, that's really been the work. That's really been how we've tried to collaborate across these two processes. And a bit of a meme within our process has generated around sort of this field of dreams idea of, and it's in there, it's if we build it, they will come. For us, it's more of an as we build it, they will come. And it's this idea that the end goal, and again, hearing from Homeward Trust, it was really interesting sitting there being like, ooh, there's some, I think there's a vision for us that can be pulled in some ways from that. But it's this idea of the Plan to End Chronic Homelessness and the associated community-driven leadership model and governance structure that we're standing up, more and more and more needs to become, the main vehicle and forum for our community to try and respond and end homelessness. So it is this idea of coordination, of bringing people together, and by showing results, we can continue to win trust and build relationship in our community.
So we're going to quickly just jump into a couple of the learnings, as there always are, that we have gathered along in our journey. The one that I'm referring to here is different paces. Of course, as we bring very distinctly different groups and systems together, there are different approaches to what should be done and how it should be done. The government, the more formalized system, of course, looks at system planning and integration, and of course there needs to be reports, and all of those create very structured timelines. That often is in conflict sometimes, or it's a difference of perspective when we bring in our community groups and our grassroots organizations, our lived experts who say, we need action now. We can't talk about this for the next year or 3 or 5. However, that tension is really actually not a bad thing. We know actually we need both. We need to act now, but yet we also know that what needs to be done now needs to inform, in a good way, the longer term planning. We also recognize that there is always an inherent tension between approaching a relationship-based approach versus the more traditional system, task, outcome-based approach. The two can at times feel very disconnected and almost challenging each other. That we can't really build a relationship with our community or between each other according to a Gantt chart. That's not possible. So we have learned and continue to honor that intentionality, investment of time is very critical if we say we're going to have authentic relationships with our lived experts, with our equity groups, and across and in between our service providers.
I think something that was important through this whole process is that homelessness is now and it's ongoing. And so, there was constant, what we call live action moments, and encampments being cleared. People are dying, we're uncovering more and more deep harms in the community, and there needs to be action. Or it could be a live action moment from a systems perspective. The council needs the budget now, and there's some politics that we now have to deal with. And so I think it was really important that we see those as part of the process. Like, this is going to we're going to have these moments of tension, and that our goal is to have a commitment beyond the failure. We're here to figure out a process beyond the failure and coming together through those tension moments, through the process of debriefing and unpacking those things. That is actually where the transformation is happening. And so it's actually important for us to honor and embrace those live action moments as they come up, but also really unpack that those are hard moments, and that means that we need to have care for all the different parties involved. And I think this kind of goes to a lived expertise process. You'll notice we kind of have it as a two-stream process, and that is intentional in that there is things we realized around how much lived experts wanted to be in a room full of agency voices, how much agency voices wanted to be in a room full of the people most impacted. And so it's important for us to have these separate streams where we could really articulate the full truths of each positionality, but also have lots of opportunities for relationships. So having it be like a DNA helix, maybe where they're separate but constantly in relationship, was really important because it really allowed us to really keep this process going through those live action moments. But I will say we have not been successful in all ways because this was supposed to be a 3-pillared process with equity groups, and it's been hard to. We have not found the right secret sauce to build out that trust within that with those core groups as well. We're hoping that we can learn from what we've done with lived experts to the broader range of lived expertise and equity.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly wrap up here. I know we're short on time, sorry. So yeah, being limited by resources and capacity, pretty straightforward, but yes, what does it mean for us, and we're still working through this, what does it mean for us to ask even more of these folks to come into our process, to give of themselves, of their time, negotiating and creating safety and support for folks is something that we're still imagining and learning around. And then the last one here about transformation being about inclusion. One of the marquee moments in our process was when taking the plan to council. We had 17 separate delegations from the community around this plan, and it was the momentum that was built by including all of these different people in our process that built that. So lastly, just a couple next steps for us. David pointed to building out a lived expertise roster of consultants, and that's going to be work that's spinning up. We're also continuing with policy review and revision, and then we're also designing this community-driven system leadership model. And then, we're unpacking that plan document and starting to implement on it. So, great. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. If you're from Waterloo Region, put your hand up. There's a lot of folks here. Again, just kind of a bit of a show of like how many people are involved. Nice. Thank you. Chris.
Big thanks again to Peter, David, and Ben. Next, I would like to welcome to the stage our final presentation. This is the Thompson Model, a revolution in cab governance. We'll be hearing from Andrea Hatley, the Community Entity Coordinator for the City of Thompson, Leo Moose, the Lived Experience Circle member with the Thompson Community Advisory Board, Rona V. Smith, the LEC Coordinator with the Thompson Neighborhood Renewal Corporation, and Michelle Nicholsaw, Executive Director at Men Are Part of the Solution, Inc.
Well, thank you everyone for sticking around for the last presentation of the day. It's been a long day. The four of us here on stage are from Thompson, Manitoba, which is the traditional territory of the Nisichawayachuk Cree Nation and the homeland of the Métis people. And we're here to share with you what we're doing to address homelessness in an innovative and some would say revolutionary way. We have developed and implemented a model of governance of lived experience that flips the traditional power dynamic on its head to empower the people, the same people that it is meant to serve. The Thompson model of lived experience governance was born out of a need to develop the Reaching Home mandated coordinated access system. And when it came time to build the governance system, if we wanted to have different results in the community, we needed to have a different approach, a new approach to tackle homelessness. And what a better way than to put the people of lived experience in charge of the system. With the right supports, they certainly couldn't do any worse than what had been happening in the community so far. And in fact, after 2 years of cutting their teeth on coordinated access, the model has now been adopted by our by our Community Advisory Board, and it is a fully functioning model. There are 4 essential pillars for the success of the Thompson model. Decision makers are people with lived experience of homelessness. And Thompson is composed of 4 to 7 members selected based on the demographics of the homeless community. And this group holds the decision-making and voting power. It has their own terms of reference, and it makes in-camera, consensus-based decisions. The second component is the advisory, and that consists of community partners, members from the homeless serving sector, the 3 levels of government, academia, landlords, police, health services, and others. This group provides the expertise and the information that the people with lived experience need to make informed decisions. All members of this group are non-voting and sit as ex officios. Support is required for the model to work, and it comes in 2 forms. Practical support is provided by a designated coordinator, typically an individual who looks after the day-to-day logistical, administrative, training, and technical aspects to meet the needs of people with lived experience. This ensures that they have the means to get to meetings, they have the tools and understanding to work with up-to-date software and processes, and acts as their gatekeeper. Conceptual support looks after higher-level aspects to ensure that people with lived experience understand program requirements and limitations. They understand the funding processes, proposal analysis, developing reports such as the community plan, the community homelessness report, and other high-level decision-making activities. In our presentation today, I've got a representative from each pillar that will discuss and share with you what they represent, who they represent, sorry, what they bring to the table, what they struggle with, why they're important, and any other aspects of the job they want to share. So first, I'd like to introduce Leo Moose, and he represents the Lived Experience Circle, our decision makers.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leo Moose. I've been LEC member since 2022. I represent the 7 members of the Lived Experience Circle, which are 4 women, 3 men, all Indigenous people. All of us are very passionate about ending homelessness. We are excited about being part of the solution to this. We all want to help our brothers and our sisters. Over the last 2 years, the LEC has made decisions on community priorities and the policies that received unanimous support. In 2023, as a shadow cap making recommendations on call for proposals which were endorsed and adopted by existing cap. What the LEC brings to the model, the LEC brings a much needed perspective of the people who are or have been part of the homeless community. The LEC brings an Indigenous perspective to addressing homelessness. A willingness to work together to solve problems facing the homeless community. what our struggles are. Need for technical support in training, communications, dealing with daily triggers and stressors, why the LEC is important, gives the people who truly understand homelessness the power to be at the discussion table and to make decisions. Give a voice to people who are typically considered invisible and marginalized. Thank you. Back to Hattie.
Thank you, Leo. And I'd like to introduce Michelle Nicholsaw, who is speaking on behalf of the advisory for the Thompson model.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Nicholsaw. I guess I didn't need to say that again. I have been a member of the Community Advisory Board, CAB, since 2012. I am currently the CAB chair, and I have been a part of the development of the Thompson model since its inception and has a governance piece of coordinate access. Our advisory board consists of 12 organizations who currently sit on CAB. Andrea did touch on most of them, but I will say them again. It's ex officios, sorry, my throat is dry, service providers, stakeholders, government, community members, youth services, health services, police services, Indigenous organizations. So what does the advisory bring? The individuals that sit on CAB are extremely important to this model. They bring members to the table who provide expert advice and insights from community organizations to the Live Experience Circle about specific things of what they have knowledge about, such as programs and services currently available, sharing of funding opportunities, historic context of what has been tried and has been successful, and what has not been successful. Discussions on sustainability for applicants, alignment for the intent of the funding, and whether the applicant has the capacity to deliver on the program. So were there struggles? Well, it's important to note all members of this group are non-voting. Switching from being in control mode to an advisory mode was an adjustment for many CAB members. We went through a time where the LEC was considered shadow CAB, seeing the recommendations that the LEC made as shadow CAB alleviated many fears. Once existing CAB members understood how important their new advisory role was, there was an increased engagement in the community. Of course, not all organizations signed on, but we did have new organizations that did want to sign on and stayed. So why are we important? Why the advisory is important? They give the LEC information they need to make informed decisions on. The model does not work without the advisory. The decision the LEC makes are only as good as the information on what those decisions are based on. So oh my goodness. I can't say that.
You can just say we need.
Yeah, we need at least 50% of quorum there. And now it's,
Sorry, yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah,
So now,
sorry.
here's Rona Smith representing the practical support pillar of the Thompson model.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. So I am Rona, aka Miss Rona, Auntie Rona, and I am new to the fight to end homelessness. But I love people and I love to serve others, and I'm very, very deliberate about making people feel comfortable, confident in themselves, and just simply cheering them on. So I'm so happy to be a part of this group. Quality is really who I am. Therefore, I pursued a career in quality management systems, risk management, training and development. So whatever Auntie Rona knows, you are going to know so that you can achieve your purpose in life. And this is what I bring to the table. So Miss Andrea just introduced me as the gatekeeper. So now I have another responsibility that I didn't know about. But I am part of the two-pronged support. So Miss Andrea is the first part of that support, and I am the practical support as the Lived Experience Circle Coordinator. And I have four key areas of support that I provide. So I provide administrative support, logistical support, capacity building, and most importantly, team building. And these supports are what make my specific role on the Community Advisory Board supporting the Lived Experience Circle. So in my administrative role, I ensure that the LEC team has all the tools and the resources that they need to get their job done. So it's important that they're provided with the resources that they need so that they can make informed decisions. So I make sure they have their up-to-date records, if there's any clarifications that is needed. And what is so great about this, as we have our discussions, we tell them, don't wait on us to call the meeting. You call us. I work for you. So if you need something to be done, call me. And I'm there to assist them. In terms of logistics, so anywhere they need to get to. So if they're coming to a meeting where we're discussing any decisions from CAB, if we're going to CAB meeting, if we're coming to the conference, if we're going to a summit, I make sure they get there safely, and they're absolutely comfortable when they get there. From my training and development capacity, I am now here to help them to understand and to really grow in their role as the new leaders. And so I am very fortunate to be imparting and learning from the Live Experience Circle as we develop the model together. And then team building is so very important to the entire process. And in that team building, we ensure there's cohesion and there's camaraderie. And so when you hear Leo talk about how the team comes together and we hear each other's voices, there's no such thing as a stupid question. We make sure that we discuss everything and everyone is clear on what is happening. So what are some of those struggles that we have? There is really just one struggle. And that particular struggle is that there are members who don't really like cell phones, or they don't have access to the internet. But this is something we are currently working on to make sure that there are resorts for that, so we can be in touch with them. And there is still some holdouts who don't want to use a computer, right, Elder Jack? So we do have the holdout, but again, we are going to be working and having working solutions for that, because it's important that in their role as the decision makers, that they are equipped, they are resourced with everything that they need to be effective in what they do. So why is this important? Now, I would challenge anyone in this room to show me a leader who is well-informed, always on time, or is simply just always on the ball. Show me any leader, and I know that he or she has an effective or an efficient secretary, administrative assistant, personal assistant, that would be me, who ensures that he or she has everything that they need and need to know and understand as well. So we ensure that the LEC has the necessary tools in their toolbox and knows how to use the tool in the toolbox so that they can get the job done. After all, they are making decisions on millions of public purse money, right? So we have to make sure that that happens. Relationship building within the team, with our different partners who support the homelessness population and community members as a whole. And so that's why once you have decided to implement this Thompson lived experience governance model, you do need that technical support.
Super, thanks, Ms. Rona. No, I don't know how I'm going to follow that up. I'm next. I'm just providing conceptual support. So I'm Andrea Hatley. I'm the Community Entity Coordinator for the City of Thompson. I was in this role originally in 2012 when the city signed on with the Homeless Partnering Strategy. I left the role after about a year and a half. I came back to it in 2021, and my slide. And I was surprised a little bit to see the same faces at the table. Not much had changed, really. The needle really hadn't moved in those ensuing 9-10 years. And when it came around time to implementing the coordinated access system and developing a governance model, I'm like, okay, we're not going to just duplicate CAB, and we're not going to get anything different. So that's kind of how the whole model started, through coordinated access and a historical perspective. Maybe on my slide.
This one's mine.
No, yeah. Okay, so what I bring to the table is a knowledge of the Reaching Home program directives and the requirements, program requirements. I set the direction and the tone of the meetings. I provide stability and the framework that's needed for the entire process. And I wish I could go on and on like Ms. Rona did about everything else I do, but I don't know. So those are the three essential things that I bring to the table. Where I still struggle occasionally is I'm constantly thinking about ways that I can support the lived experience circle. How can we set them up for success in whatever they have to do? I work closely with Ms. Rona to ensure the LEC have the tools that they need. She can identify gaps for me, and I can see what I can do to fill those gaps. And I work closely with the LEC members themselves to ensure that they're properly prepared for meetings. Right now, we're having pre-CAB meetings, so we will review what will be discussed at the meetings, what the expectations are for the meetings, so there's no surprises. So they cannot show up to a meeting and go, what? I didn't know we were talking about this, right? So we're constantly setting them up for success. And why this support is important is because it provides capacity building for governance. It ensures that policies and procedures are understood and followed. It ensures that the decisions that the LEC make are informed and that they're grounded in reality. And it keeps the whole process moving forward. So in a nutshell, that's the Thompson model. And I can give you an analogy that helps people understand how it works in practice. So if you think about how the judicial system is set up, with a presiding judge to keep order and ensure that the laws are followed, with a series of experts and witnesses to give testimony, with a jury of peers to determine a verdict, and with the court clerk to keep everything running. So in this instance, the presiding judge is the community entity tasked with keeping order and making sure that the jury has an understanding of the processes, policies, procedures, and the information they need to make decisions. The experts and witnesses are the community partners, the advisory, tasked with providing all of the relevant information regarding a topic. The jury is a lived experience circle, and they're tasked with considering all the information that has been provided and reaching consensus-based decisions while sequestered. The court clerk is the LEC coordinator, tasked with looking after the needs of the LEC. The process requires the engaged participation of all four components to work. And this is key. It's engaged participation, because if any one of those four pillars is missing or they aren't holding their weight, the whole thing falls apart. We all have to work together to make this work. So why implement the Thompson model? Leo, you're going to lead this.
Thank you very much. I wish I had 3 days, not 30 seconds. Representation. Homeless population in our town of Thompson is over 90% indigenous. But decisions about reaching home, funding, were being made by CAP that had little indigenous representation. Now there is a majority indigenous voting body, and our advisory is 50% indigenous.
Michelle?
2, conflict of interest. Previous CAB members were plagued with, sorry, let me start. Previously, CAB members were plagued with a conflict of interest, perceived or actual. Being in a small city, small members sit on each other's boards. This model removes members of the voting body. They are not funding applicants, and they do not sit on the boards of the funding applicants. Leo, sorry.
About us, by us. Decisions are no longer being made about the homeless community without input of people with lived experience. Now decisions are being made by us with input from homeless serving partners.
Collaborative power with relationships replace traditional power over bureaucracies. The advisory and the LEC work together to come to an understanding about homelessness issues and ways to address them.
Increased motivation, engagement by people with living experience of homelessness. It is often easier to interact with people who've had similar life experiences. We are seen as role models.
Expected continual improvements for support and services through improved dialogue between the LEC and service providers. An opportunity to help identify gaps and set the direction for local services.
And then I get to bring it home.
Yes, you do.
You go.
I go, all right.
You go.
Team support. And then lastly, empowerment. So the Thompson model empowers people with lived experience. And so the lived experience circle members are empowered both personally as well as professionally. They are now at the helm of steering their own course, which builds their confidence and it gives them a sense of fulfillment. In their role, they are supporting their brothers and sisters to heal and to build resilience, which Leo spoke to. They give other people with lived experience hope. And I'm sure you've been to a lot of sessions and you've heard that word over and over again. And so when they see themselves in that role, they have a sense of hope. That's the needle is moving. Our presenters before talked about the journey and the story. It's moving. They are now developing skills, the skill sets in leadership, public speaking. We have Dolores Cook over here, and today she had to do a public speaking engagement, and I mean, she was shaking, but she did it. She did it because she, yes, give her snaps. Yes, give her those snaps. Yay. She did it because she understood the importance of what it is that she's working on. They now have those problem-solving skill sets that they're developing, and of course, the use of technology. Right, Elder Jack? I just have to keep saying that, you know, he's the last holdout on that. So what more can we say about why you should consider implementing the Thompson model in your community? Come on board, we're here to help if it is that you need help in making this a part of your community. Okay? Then, this is good news. So endorsement. So first of all, the city of Thompson, the mayor and council, they saw the value of the Thompson model to our community, and they gave their stamp of approval. And so if you were here before, the presenters spoke about the session before this, how their council made the difference. Our council has given that stamp of approval, and we're working together from that level. Then hot off the press, recently inked, just last week, the Thompson model received endorsement from the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network, and we are so proud of this as a community. Woohoo! Yes. So those are the 8 reasons. Those are the whys. So this model does not work without the support of our community. So a big thank you goes to, and as I call these persons, I want you to stand up. This is community. Our group from Waterloo, they had their team stand up. It is all about community, and it only works with community. So today we have with us Lived Experience Circle members, 4 of them. We've got Leo Moose right here with me at the table. We've got Elder Jack Robinson right in the front. We've got Dolores Cook. Keep standing, Dolores Cook. And we've got Douglas Hart. Keep standing. These are our decision makers, our Lived Experience Circle. The members who are not here but must also be recognized are Garnet Dysert, Angel Hayter, and Crystal Nicholas. And they all make up the Lived Experience Circle. Journeying with us from Thompson as well, we have got our Mayor Colleen Smoke. And right behind her, we have our city manager, Anthony McInnes. Get up, Anthony. Woo-hoo! And now, the members of the Thompson Community Advisory Board being ably chaired by Michelle Nicholson and their staff members. You just all get up. And they're all here. I see Miss Mary. I see Miss Helen Trudeau. Stand. I see John Donovan. They're all here. And from the Thompson Neighborhood Renewal Corporation, we have Oswald Saul. Ladies and gentlemen, the Thompson model works because of the collaborative efforts of all those who stand or sit before you today. It works. As a team, I'm going to ask the entire Thompson team to stand for this part. Come on, Thompson, stand up. Come on. And let me just scoot over here. Yes. Thank you. So we are here today because of our champion on the national front, Quinn. Quinn, stand up. Now, Quinn caught the vision of what we wanted to do in Thompson, and he became our midwife. His words, not mine. Quinn said that the Thompson model is my baby. So did you not? Yes, he did. He has been our head coach. He has been our advocate. And Thompson just want to let you know you are so important to us, and we really appreciate the work, how you have worked with us. And you have been our supporter extraordinaire. And we just want to give you a round of applause for your help. So thank you so much. Our contact information is on the screen, and you can scan the QR code if you do need to contact any one of us. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to say one last thing. We have merch. If anybody wants a pin, Thompson model. I don't think I have enough for the room, but whoever gets up here. The QR code will link to a white paper that explains everything that we've done with the Thompson model, and a little bit more detail of our presentation today. So feel free to go to that URL and fire away with questions.
Thanks so much. We are, of course, running a little bit behind time, so we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions if anyone is burning to ask their question. Very loudly, please.
David, yeah. So I had a question about when you're bringing together a group of experts and wanting to create autonomy, but you're bringing them together for a purpose, so there's work to do. But also, as you said, the live act, like things come up and things happen, and how you walk that line of keeping people, I don't want to say keeping people on track, but getting the work done, and also like the real issues that matter to them in their lives and that they want to address, like doing both, I guess.
You just clean up the mess that we made. so like when half comes up, you go out, you gotta fix it, and then keep fixing it.
I think the independence of lived experts is important. It's important that we have a vital network of mutual aid groups and advocacy groups. I think it's important that we have a vital network of independent grassroots mutual aid groups, that lived experts have their independence, their ability to do advocacy and do on-the-ground work. That really helps. And I think it's because we're in this network, I mean, we're able to work, like, I'm not alone. Like, we're able to work at different levels, right? There's so many people in Waterloo Region who are trying to do something about things. So maybe, yeah, half of the network gets caught up in processing and debriefing a live action moment, but that doesn't mean that people aren't still trying to keep the policy fires moving.
Can I add something? Sorry. Just from my experience, it was the way that they started out, it really created a safe place. Like, so I'd never been in a room before with so many different people at different levels, and just being able to have a voice and be heard, like that really, really helped a lot, so.
All right. Any last questions? Okay, well,
John, don't ask your question.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. They're all great. For the Peel Group, one question, which your community co-creation part, the process you went through, how important did you find was to have lived experience people take a front leadership role in talking to the community, in helping to move that needle to help to bring forward more community support versus a bunch of bureaucrats?
I'll maybe take a first crack at it. It's an excellent question. And I'll start by saying that it's still very much in sort of design and evolution in terms of how and where and when we're bringing those voices into that. I think in our last, I'd say 3 to 4 meetings is really when we've actually started to try to intentionally bring individuals from the lived experience prototyping cohort, those sort of two streams, we've started to try to merge. So lots to learn there. And in terms of the sort of outward-facing public engagement and education, yeah, there's lots and lots and lots of work to do there. But one of the actions that we're about to be spinning up is around that. And, you know, we're looking at resources that are already in the community. So there's already been some great work done to capture lived experience stories. So we have video montages and all these things already set up and lined up. So let's not redo the work. Let's leverage these activities that have already happened. So again, it's all very live action, but I really appreciate that question. I don't know if anybody else wants. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are at time, so I would encourage if folks have additional questions, just a reminder, everyone's contact information can be found by scanning the QR code on the back of your name badge. So I encourage you to track down the facilitators you'd like to hear more from and get their contact info to follow up. So let's have one final round of applause for all of our presenters today.
Great. We're going to give out this birch now. We're going to take what's not